G'day guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be presenting my findings from when I compared the Garmin Approach R50 to the Foresight GC3. Now, for years, I've been saying the Foresight GC3 is the gold standard when it comes to home simulated golf. Obviously, the quad is the gold standard, but the GC3 is the baby brother, and it really is accurate, reliable, and it really packs a punch for the home user. Now, obviously, you're going to have to pay to get that device. It's a lot more expensive than a lot of the other devices in that category, but it is, I mean, Foresight devices are known as being the gold standard. So whenever I compare a launch monitor, I do like to do it against the Foresight unit. Unlike any of my other videos where I actually hit the shots in front of you guys, I have just collected the data sets and I'm just going to present them to you. I feel like this is going to be a lot more streamlined and a lot easier. However, let me know in the comment section if you like watching me hit the shots in front of you and then presenting it live. In this test, I hit pitching wedge, 7-iron, 4-iron, and driver. I only took out 3 shots from this test. I was actually hitting it really good. I took out 1 driver with the GC3, 1 driver with the Garmin, and then 1 pitching wedge, I think it was. Yeah, it was a pitching wedge with the GC3 that I just hit horrendous. So I did remove 3 shots from this. And I guess the whole point of this is because I had to compare these units individually. So I couldn't compare these side by side. And the reason for that is because the actual GC3 won't lock onto the ball when the Garmin's sitting there. So the Garmin must have, you know, really powerful infrared sensors that just overwhelms the GC3 because the GC3 would not lock onto the ball. So these sets were done individually. So I first tested with the GC3 and I collected all the data, and then I put that to the side, got the Garmin R50 and collected the same data sets. I know this is not a perfect solution, and I know there's going to be a lot of people in the comment section that have a problem with that, but if you watch any of my videos, I'm quite consistent. When I hit the golf ball, I do believe the data sets are accurate and you're going to get a really good idea of how this unit performs. So without further ado, let's bring up the data. So first off, we'll start with pitching wedges. So this was the pitching wedge data. I have the GC3 on top, and then we have the Garmin R50 below it. All of these data sets, I will link in the description, the raw data files for this test. So feel free to go down there, do your own digging, do your own research, but this is just me comparing for you guys just on the fly. So GC3 on the top, Garmin R50 below it. When I do these tests, I've got to stress this. When I do these tests, all I care about is the raw data. So the raw metrics from the golf ball. So all of these softwares are just going to use the actual golf ball data in their algorithm. And what I mean by golf ball data is ball speed, spin axis or side spin, backspin, horizontal launch angle, and vertical launch angle. So those are the metrics that we care about today. So as long as all those metrics are consistent and accurate, no matter what software you use, you can use this device and it will use the software's algorithm to then calculate things like carry distance, total distance, peak height, you know, offline. All of those things are going to be software driven. All we care about today are those raw metrics captured by the device. Okay, so metrics below, you can see I've got averages in yellow for each device. GC3 is on top. So let's go ball speed first. I have done carry distance and total distance. Both of these devices, I used GS Pro as the software, so they're both going to be the same. Ball speeds for the pitching wedge. So GC3, I had an average of 106.5 miles an hour for ball speed with the pitching wedge. With the Garmin R50, I had 104.6, so slightly slower with the Garmin R50. I will say I collected the data for the Garmin R50 first, sorry. So I did the Garmin R50, then the GC3. Now, the other thing I'll say is I was completely warmed up when I started doing this test. So I'd had a good session, I was warmed up, I was hitting it well. And so it's not like I wasn't warmed up for the Approach and then I warmed up for the Garmin, for the Foresight. I was warmed up, I was hitting it well. However, I collected the data for the Garmin R50 first and then the GC3. So ball speeds we saw slightly higher on the Foresight, 2 miles an hour roughly. For the backspin, extremely close. So we had 8,400 for the Foresight, we had 8,374 for the Garmin R50. For shot shape, the Garmin had slightly more of a draw, but not much. What I will say is the Foresight device, I do tend to hit straighter than a lot of other units. So for the side spin or, spin axis, we had slightly more draw spin with the Garmin R50 than the Foresight. Again, I did individual sets. These aren't the same shot, so I did individual sets with each unit. I could potentially have hit more of a draw when I was testing with the Garmin and then hit it straighter with the Foresight, but that is the data. Slightly more of a left spin axis with the Garmin. Realistically, that is not much of a side spin for a pitching wedge. You're not going to see much deviation. So both of those numbers, take it with a grain of salt because they're individual sets. Looking at the horizontal launch angle, both of them took off slightly left. So 0.5 or half a degree for the Foresight and then 0.6 of a degree for the Garmin. Vertical launch angles, identical, both 26. And then there you can see the raw spin axis of negative 3.3 for the Garmin and negative 1.2 for the Foresight. So data there, we saw slightly higher ball speed for the Foresight. 2 miles an hour, so that is a little bit of a difference. And then everything else looks pretty much the same, maybe a bit more of a draw with the Garmin R50. I can't stress this enough, they're individual sets, so take it with a grain of salt. Both of those data sets for me are pretty good. I always say 136 is my carry distance for a pitching wedge. If we look at the average carries, we had 135.3 for the Garmin, and we had 138 with the Foresight, so very good. Moving on to 7-irons. So this was the 7-irons. I generally say for my 7-iron, when I hit it well, I have increased speed a little bit, but generally about 174 to 176 is generally my carry distance. I was swinging it good today, so we've seen carry distance a little bit further. But let's go through the raw data. So ball speed, we had 125.7, call it, for the Foresight. We've had 124.4 for the Garmin. So again, we're seeing slightly higher ball speed with the Foresight unit. For backspin numbers, they are pretty much, the averages are pretty much identical. 6,094 versus 5,935, that's well within tolerances. So spin is, it's fantastic. For shot shape, we did see slightly more of a draw with the Garmin again. However, I can't stress this enough, individual sets, they're both very, very close. Horizontal launch angles, identical. Vertical launch angles, identical. And then we look at the raw spin axis. Again, we can see slightly more of a draw with the Garmin. So all of that raw data leads to 177.4 yards carry with the Garmin versus 178.6 yards carry with the Foresight. So we're getting an extra yard carry because of that increased ball speed. Pretty close on the data. It is very close for the data. I've got to say, since having this Garmin, I've used it a few times, and sometimes I do feel like the ball speed and my carry distance is a little bit short, but it is so close. It is well within tolerances. Okay, going on to the 4-irons, again, let's focus on those raw metrics. So ball speed with the Foresight, we had 141.3 versus 140.7 with the Garmin. So very close, but again, we see a slightly more ball speed from the Foresight. Looking at spin rates, we had 38.64 for the Foresight versus 36.77 from the Garmin. So close, well within tolerances. For the side spin, again, we've had slightly more of a draw if you look at the averages. However, if you look at the individual shots, they both fluctuate. We're hitting 4-irons. So, I did hit some perfect 4-irons. I was very happy with those shots. But again, looking at average spin and spin axis numbers, side spin, and spin axis numbers, it can be very misleading. Looking at the horizontal launch angle, both pretty much identical. The Foresight taking off dead straight as an average, and the Garmin taking off 0.3 of a left, incredibly close to zero horizontal launch angle. Looking at vertical launch angles, we had the Foresight slightly higher at 14 degrees or 14.2 versus the 13.4 with the Garmin. Again, very, very close. And then looking at the spin axis numbers, again, you can see the Garmin with slightly more of a left spin axis as an average. Okay, the big one, onto driver. So with the driver, going to the raw metrics, we had 162.4 as an average ball speed with the Foresight. We had 162.4 average ball speed with the Garmin. I mean, that is identical. Again, individual shots, so take it as you want, but both of these units, I mean, they're both averaging the exact same for ball speed over the 5 shots that I hit, or 6 shots, I think it was. Looking at the backspin numbers, we did have slightly higher backspin with the Garmin. Individual sets, and I was hitting these with a tiny bit of a cut, so the backspin is kicked up slightly. I mean, if you look at the individual shots for side spin, you can see that the Garmin averaged a bit more of a fade. So look, whenever you're hitting the ball with a bit of a fade, spin is going to kick up. So I've hit more of a fade with the Garmin, so the backspin is kicked up slightly higher. But looking at the raw data sets, we had an average of 2,300 for the Foresight and 2,600 for the Garmin. Looking at the side spin, we did have a bit more of a fade with the Garmin, so potentially that's where that extra backspin's coming from. Horizontal launch angles, again, pretty much identical. Vertical launch angles, we had just under 14 degrees for the Foresight now as an average. We had just under 13 degrees with the Garmin, so a degree in it, both pretty close. And then if you look at the spin axis, we had a bit more of a fade with the Garmin. Okay, those are the raw data sets for the golf ball data for the GC3 versus the Garmin Approach R50. Let me know in the comment section what you make of that. If you like that style of format of video, is it more digestible, or do you want to see me hit all of those shots? I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you did, let me know. Any comments or questions, leave them down below, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Cheers.